Okay. Welcome, everybody, to session 3 of AFP Alaska Chapter's summer series, Future Funded, which has been our deep dive into endowment campaigns, endowments, and planned giving. We're joined today by Elizabeth Miller, who I work with at the Alaska Community Foundation. And Elizabeth Miller has been a certified fundraising executive since 2002, and she has dedicated her career to fundraising for Alaska nonprofits. After a 30-plus year career at United Way of Anchorage, she joined the team at the Alaska Community Foundation in July of 2019 as the Vice President of Development and Communications. Her favorite part of the work that she does at ACF is helping donors create the charitable plans for the legacies they wish to leave. To increase her ability to help donors, Elizabeth studied and tested for and received the Chartered Advisor in Philanthropy Professional Certification earlier this year. So, congratulations, Elizabeth. A lifelong Alaskan, Elizabeth grew up in Talkeetna. She attended college in Spokane, Washington, where she graduated from Gonzaga University with a bachelor's degree with a major in international business. She and her husband of over 25 years have one daughter. Elizabeth enjoys playing the flute, reading, traveling, and hiking. She completed the Camino de Santiago in Spain in the spring and summer of 2019. And this isn't in her bio, but I thought I would add, she's also an excellent Snurts player and frequently beats all of us at that game. So if you haven't played Snurts, I'm sure Elizabeth would love to play with you and teach you the ropes. So today, Elizabeth is going to be telling us how to move beyond the annual gift and some tips and tricks for that. So I am going to stop sharing my screen and hand it over to Elizabeth.
Thank you very much, Celeste. We're going to make this work here just a moment. Okay. So on the in front of you, you have my screen now, right, Celeste?
I'm not seeing it, but that could be a me issue.
Well, let's look at others. What was that?
Yeah, we don't see it yet. Just confirming slots.
Interesting. Okay, well, let's try it again. We really did practice this.
It was working earlier.
Okay, I'm going to back out of this. One more try. There we are.
Yeah, this one we can see your notes, Elizabeth, just as a reminder. Wait there.
Is that the right one?
I mean, we can definitely see the slides, but I can.
So this is, you're still seeing my note screen?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll try it one more time. And Celeste, while I figure this out, could you welcome everybody. Sorry for the technology issues. I really wanted to get a feel for who was here and what organizations are represented as far as size and experience with endowments. And so I've prepared 3 survey questions that Celeste is going to have you answer. And so let's move to that now while I get this figured out.
Absolutely, yes. So 3 questions. I'm going to go ahead and launch it. So please take your time to answer those survey questions. And then just a quick note on question number 3, there is a yes, and then there's a yes at ACF. So just between the 2 choices there. We'll try to get 100% participation, and then I can end the poll. Do you see those results coming in? Thank you for participating.
Okay, and so what I'm seeing is very helpful, very helpful. Most of you are quite from smaller organizations as far as the size of the development department, and that is what I expected. And so I do think that the information I have for you will be very helpful. And for those of you that may be further along in this, you might be hearing things that you know, but hopefully there'll be a few new things for you as well. Okay, so let's try this one more time.
I shared the poll results so that everybody could see those as well, but I can stop sharing, Elizabeth, so you can share your screen.
Okay. Okay, we're going to try it one more time. Oh, this was the problem. Okay.
Perfect.
You're seeing it now?
I'm seeing your screen now. That's perfect.
Okay.
And for those of you who are on Zoom, you can toggle between the meeting screen where you get to see all of our lovely faces or Elizabeth Miller's screen. So we should be on Elizabeth Miller's screen now. Thank you. Take it away, Elizabeth.
Thank you. And I'd love to say it was a technology issue, but it really was an operator issue. So, well, welcome to all of you. It's great to be here with you. So where we're at in this 3-part series is some of you, probably most of you sat in on the first session where Cynthia covered the policies and procedures regarding plan gifts, gift acceptance, etc., and endowments. And then Harry last week covered the types of planned gifts and a lot of technical information there. And I hope you'll remember that Harry said you didn't need to remember it all. And in fact, he offered to provide some expert advice if needed. And always there's our professional advisors that we can go to, and we'll talk more about them a little bit later in my talk here. And so today we really are going to be talking about how best to move your organization and your donors, really beyond the annual gift, or as we talked about a lot when I was at United Way, annualitis. How do we move beyond annualitis? And so today, we are going to be covering a little bit about sustainability and how plan giving might play a part in that, a little bit about endowments, some basics about legacy giving, and some really simple options for promoting legacy giving, planned giving, including some donor segmentation, some no and low cost options. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about legacy societies as far as recognition vehicles, and also six steps to a legacy giving program for those of you that might want to move beyond some very simple low cost, no cost types of things. And then I've got lots of resources to share with you. As Celeste said, this is being recorded and the slide deck will be shared after the presentation. Go ahead and use the chat box for questions. Celeste will be monitoring that. And raise your digital hand as well if you want to ask that question during the presentation. We should have time for those. Okay, so we already asked the survey questions, and that was really helpful for me to see and probably kind of interesting for you to see. We have everything from all volunteer organizations to organizations that actually have 6 or more development folks on their staff. Just like Harry and Cynthia had in theirs, this is a disclaimer. This is information for educational purposes only. I don't have much technical information in here, I don't think at all, but this is not legal advice, of course. So we really encourage you to work with professional advisors, estate planning attorneys that might be friends with your organization for some of this information. So this probably looks familiar to many of you. It's often referred to, it's a version of what's called a donor pyramid. And really, you know, the basis of this is that there are many small gifts, a very broad base of folks that are giving small gifts. And then that shrinks a little bit when you get to annual gifts, but really the annual budget of your organization when it comes to gifts, charitable gifts, are usually from a broad number of folks giving smaller amounts. And as you move up the donor pyramid, you know, you might then have a fewer number of folks giving major gifts. Some of that, you know, crosses the line between annual gifts that are very large and major gifts that are more one-time or maybe a multi-year gift, a pledge, that a gift that's made over several years via a pledge. And then the pinnacle of the donor pyramid is that small little triangle at the top where your really most ardent supporters are, and they give planned gifts, or they give a gift of an end of life gift. And we're going to talk about some of these terms in just a moment. But again, that's a small number compared to that broad base of annual gifts and occasional gifts. As donors kind of move up this pyramid, of course, their relationship deepens with the organization. And you, as the nonprofit, are providing more engagement opportunities for these folks. These levels are not mutually exclusive. And as I already mentioned, sometimes annual gifts that are very large kind of morph into major gifts. And major gifts very often are part of planned gifts. And these days, there's even an area of work in fundraising that's all about blended gifts. And so that would be a major gift kind of blended with a planned gift. And we're going to talk a little bit about the differences in these. And one of the differences is as donors are making plans for end of life giving to your organization, you know, they're working oftentimes with their professional advisors, their financial planners, maybe their CPA, often their estate planning attorney. And they're starting to understand that they can make some major gifts of current assets, be that cash or non-cash, during their lifetime. So that might, look like a major gift to you, but it's really blended with their whole charitable planning all the charitable planning that they're doing. The other thing I wanted to comment before we move on from this slide is plan gifts, those larger gifts that your organization can receive, often are going to be the gifts that provide for long-term sustainability for your organization. Now, does that mean that all plan gifts are directed to your endowment? And I can't see faces, but I'm hoping you're all shaking your head. Oh no, that can't be. Don't really, all gifts, right, are directed by your donors. You can help donors understand that how advantageous it would be for them and for your organization for plan gifts to be directed to your endowment. But for some, that's not what they want to do. And so you'll be working with them. As Harry talked about last time, you will be doing gift planning with them ideally. And so you can have those conversations with them. So I'm going to move on now, though, and address a concern that some of your board members might express. Well, but if a donor makes a plan gift, they say they're going to give us a big chunk of their estate upon their death, they're not going to give to our annual campaign anymore. I think that our profession is doing a really good job to really talk about the reality, and maybe that worry is not as prevalent as it was. But the reality is donors who make plan gifts are often among your most loyal supporters, and their testamentary commitment reflects a really deep alignment with your mission. And that actually tends to reinforce their ongoing support rather than diminish it. So these are people who already support you, and they want to see you to continue to thrive so that you're around and that you're strong when their plan gift comes your way. And they also, when they make a bequest, that can really deepen their psychological connection to your organization. And this sense of legacy and identity with the cause can really motivate continue or increased annual giving. So because they want to see the impact of their support during their lifetime. So I hope that if you have folks that have this concept or this fear that if a donor makes a planned gift, they're no longer going to want to support your annual campaign, you can really help to debunk that myth. So let's talk a little bit about semantics. And this is the definitions of these 4 phrases, words, are really important. And sometimes they're used interchangeably. And I want to be really careful today that we aren't using them interchangeably. Plan gifts, as we talk about them, are charitable gifts that really take planning on the part of the donor. They often are working with you, a representative of the nonprofit. They also often are working with their professional advisors. As I said, either an estate planning attorney, financial planner, or a CPA, sometimes all 3, and you're sitting at the table with them. Usually, plan gifts are going to include non-cash assets. And remember, Harry talked about last week how that's where our donors hold their wealth. It is a rare person that has all of their wealth in cash these days. And so these plan gifts give your organization access to donors' other assets. Plan gifts in their simplest form can be a bequest in a will. I bequeath X number of dollars or a percentage, which is more common, of my asset to this organization, this nonprofit. And we're going to talk more about them. They are very easy and really the most popular form of a planned gift. There are other simple ones, including, directed proceeds from a trust. Not all trusts have to be super complicated. And beneficiary designations of an IRA. So there are some simple plan gifts that if you can learn about those three today, you can do a lot with your donors. And the other ones that Harry mentioned and talked about are important to know that they exist, but you don't have to be the expert on them. You can go to others to get help on the intricacies of those other types. So that's planned gift. Planned gifts are a type of a charitable gift that range from the simplest, a bequest in a will, to very complex charitable remainder trusts, etc. Now, gift planning is really the activity. It's an activity where the donor and the nonprofit, often again with their professional advisors, are working to create a gift plan that meets the donor's needs and expresses the donor's values and meets the needs of the nonprofit. A lot of times the gift planning includes end of life giving plans. Not always, but often, most of the time. And last week, Harry mentioned he liked that term gift planning, as do I, because it really expresses what we're doing. We are really planning with the donor how to ensure that their values extend and help your organization. Legacy giving is also an activity, and it's the activity of planning for end-of-life charitable giving. And that's how I use that. And we're going to use legacy giving a lot today. Legacy giving can also be referred to as testamentary giving, but sometimes that's more tied to wills, or posthumous giving. But today, for simplicity, we're going to be talking about, I'm going to use the term legacy giving. When people are in the action, doing their legacy giving, sometimes they're doing gift planning as part of that. Sometimes a planned gift is going to be part of their legacy giving. And as Harry talked about last week, a legacy gift is often the very largest gift a donor will make because they are accessing their assets beyond just their cash. The other term I wanted to talk about before we move on is endowments. And so an endowment, as some of you know, because I saw many of you already have them, is a permanent fund that's established to meet the long-term goals of your organization. And as we already said, in most cases, it will be planned gifts or legacy gifts that provide your organization with sustainability for your organization far into the future. And to that end, it's very appropriate for legacy gifts to be directed to your endowed fund. And as I already referenced, honoring donor intent is primary. And so if a donor doesn't wish their legacy gift to be directed to your endowment, you work with them in other ways to have that legacy gift help your organization. And of course, as Cynthia referred to, policies are vital to be in place so that what if you get a legacy gift, somebody passes away, their estate is settled, you end up with a big check, but there's no direction with it. So you get this big unrestricted gift. You really have to have policies in place as to what your organization is going to do with that those unrestricted gifts that you get from people's estates. And I certainly advocate for unrestricted giving from legacy gifts go to endowments, but that's up to your organization to decide. A good chunk of you have endowments here at ACF, and so you've probably already seen this slide. But just to, for those of you that don't have endowments, maybe aren't as familiar, I like to say an endowment is, works just like the permanent fund dividend here in Alaska. And, it's a fund, a permanent fund where the principal remains intact and only a portion of the earnings are granted out each year or used each year to maintain your organization. And to think about how your organization can use an endowment for your sustainability, use the calculation, the conservative calculation of about 4% payout. And that's what this diagram uses. But what that means is for every $1 million you have in your endowment, you would have approximately, and this is of course no guarantee, about $40,000 a year to use at your organization. And so if you've got, you can do the math. It takes a large endowment to help offset operational costs. Have any of you done that calculation to know what it would take, what size of an endowment it would take to fund half of your operational costs? Just a show of electronic, digital hands. If you have, I'm not going to call on you. I just want to know if you've done the math. I don't see any hands going up. Do you?
No hands going up on my end and nothing in the chat.
It's a really helpful exercise. And you just get out your calculator and say, okay, what is 10 million times 0.04? $400,000. So if you have an $800,000 operating budget, you need a $10 million endowment to pay half of your operations each year. So there's a lot of work that we can do. There's a lot of room for us to grow our endowments. Okay, so what can fund an endowment? Cash can certainly fund an endowment. And there's some examples where here at ACF where an endowment fund has been opened and they've done a pretty solid way of growing that. And it's still less than $200,000. And they've done a great job in the year or two that it's been open. But so cash can fund an endowment if that's where the donor wants it to go. Certainly current non-cash assets can fund an endowment. If somebody has a piece of real estate that they want to give to the endowment, they can do that. And then, of course, as we're talking about, plan gifts and legacy gifts are often the most popular gift gifts for funding endowment and are going to be some of the largest. So why do people leave legacy gifts? And this is really core to core information to putting together some form of a marketing plan for legacy gifts for your organization. And certainly people have a passion for your organization if they leave a legacy gift to your group. It's really a way of expressing their values for themselves, for their community, for their family. For some, it's important to have that recognition in perpetuity. They might want a named fund or a named something at your organization. And for some, there are tax considerations, and there's a reason that tax considerations is at the bottom of my list. It usually is not the top reason, but it is something to be considered. And then we get to, when do people leave legacy gifts? Well, oftentimes people are writing their first will around the birth of their first child. And so that's a much younger audience than sometimes we think about people leaving a legacy gift. And honestly, those first wills where they're really writing it so that their children are protected and provided for don't necessarily have a lot of charitable bequests, but wills are often revised at other life events. So maybe a divorce, maybe a second marriage. Those are times where there may be more options for and more top of mind for charitable giving. And so it's important for us as nonprofit representatives to be promoting the concept of leaving a bequest in their will often. And we're going to talk about that. The other thing I want to point out is most realized charitable plans are added within 5 years of the death of your donor. So they may have had something in there in their first will, maybe. The last 2 revisions maybe didn't have you, but in the last revision, 5 years before their death, they put you in. And then they pass away and you receive your gift, your legacy gift from their estate. So that's really important to think of too, because it is not I should say it positively. When someone lets you know that they have put a bequest in their will to you, it's really important to steward that donor from then on. It's not a one and done thing because they can change that at any time. And as this statistic, and this is from Russell James, about this 5 years in death before death. So keep that in mind. Super important. So when you start thinking about marketing legacy giving, you're going to be thinking about your budget. Some of you and staff time. And so some of you are just volunteers. Some of you have staff. Maybe as you look at this, you're going to need to recruit either more volunteers or look at when you could add staff to this effort. But the first thing that we're going to talk about today is how to develop a really simple program, and then talk a little bit more about more programs that take a little bit more resources. So we've already talked about these very simple types of legacy gifts, a bequest in a will or an estate plan. The estate plan, that terminology just means usually there's something more than a will involved, maybe a trust, some trust documents, maybe other things. And then there's the beneficiary designation on retirement accounts. Both super simple for you to work with the donor on. And we're going to talk a little bit more about each of those. So the reason you want to start with marketing bequests is because, as this chart reflects, it's super easy for the donor, it's super easy for the nonprofit. The average gift size is going to be medium to large, and the stewardship required is low. It's not nothing. As I said, you want to stay in touch with folks and keep them up to date and keep connected with them, but bequests are super simple. As compared to charitable gift annuities and charitable remainder trusts and donor advised funds that Harry talked about last week, those are more complex and certainly require more stewardship. So focusing on the simple is the way to go. And then there's the beneficiary designation for retirement accounts. And it's simple. The donor just needs to work with the administrator of their retirement fund to get access to a beneficiary designation form. Usually they're available online. And usually it's a percentage that they're going to leave to the charity, and a percentage possibly to their heirs. The reason that and I think Harry talked about this last week, but I'm going to reinforce it. It's a really tax efficient giving option because for the retirement funds where taxes have not yet been paid, then if an heir is to inherit them, the heir has to pay the taxes. But because we are nonprofits and don't pay taxes, the donor can leave us a portion or all of their retirement fund, and we can use it all. We don't have to pay taxes on it. So if they have other assets that they can use for giving to their heirs, that's oftentimes what their professional advisors are going to advise them on. And so it's simple for them to implement now. It can support their legacy so well. I will say it can be a little challenging to, on the back end of that, after the death of the donor, as Harry mentioned last week, it's a little challenging sometimes to obtain those funds. ACF has worked with several administrators on this, and so if your endowment is here, we will do the work for you on that, and have for some of you and others. Okay, so now we want to move on to, in this, if we're going to be marketing legacy giving, who do you talk to? And so we're starting to talk a little bit about donor segmentation, but I want to make it super simple. Low-hanging fruit. Yourself and other longtime staff at your organization, or if you're a volunteer, other volunteers, including current board members and past board members. If you just made that list and started there with talking to them about leaving a legacy for your organization and talking to them about a bequest or a percentage of their IRA, you will go a long way in growing your list of legacy donors. And then as soon as you get a current board member to sign on, they can be one of your first ambassadors. And we'll talk about forming a committee a little bit later, but they could be a committee member. And then after that, then you start looking at your donor list for what I call flags. And these are frequent, long-term donors who are aged, think 65 or older, and gender specific for the G, female, females and supporters. So flags are your simple way of looking at your donor list and just saying, okay, let's start communicating with them very purposefully about leaving a bequest, or leaving a legacy gift, however you want to talk about it. But if you can be specific, and we'll talk a little bit about that later, just, have you left a gift for us in your will? If so, let us know about it. And this is a little bit more about donor segmentation and some specifics. As I mentioned, the frequent givers, who've given within at least the last 3 or 5 years. But, some of these people have been giving not just for the 3 or 5 years, but some of them have been giving to you for 10 or 20 or more years. And any gift amount, this is any gift amount, that $25 donor who's there every year for you. Long-term donors, at least 5 years or more. As I said, 65 or plus, 60 or plus is fine. And they're going to be, thinking very seriously if they're 60 or plus, doing some legacy, some wills work or estate planning, and they're friends of yours, make sure that you are top of mind. And females really are the best candidates, as they often outlive their spouses. And then think about supporters, active volunteers, alumni, for those of you that have alumni, and those with a very specific connection to your organization's mission. The little sidebar here is really just showing that 40% of the golden rule of marketing is your segmentation. So if you can get that right, you're going to be 40% closer to meeting your goals. A few more myths about marketing plan giving, but plan gifts are not going to market themselves. And then if you have tried plan giving and it didn't work, or maybe somebody prior to you in your organization has tried it, it might be because it wasn't consistent. And consistency in the messaging is really important, and it needs to be long-term, because adults only see and learn what they need to learn at the moment. So if you have a bequest message out there to a donor and they're not thinking about their will at that time, or they're not doing estate planning, that's going to go right over their head. But if you keep at it, then maybe in 3 months or in 2 years, when they are thinking, oh, I need to redo my will. Oh yeah, that organization was just asking me about that. So keep at it, be consistent. And then there's this third myth that, oh, you don't have to market it. That, the people that want to do it will do it on their own. Again, no, really, you have to be there consistently, making sure they understand how they can be connected during their lifetime and after their lifetime. So several of you are all volunteer organizations. So no paid staff, probably not a big budget for marketing, legacy giving. And so these points are how you can focus on marketing your legacy giving, and really have some significant impact with little money and no staff. So first of all, your board members are going to be your ambassadors. And so make sure they're super conversant in what you do, and then are willing to talk about bequests. But really, they have to be able to talk from the heart about what you do. And that's usually why they're on your board. Just solidify that. With your board, and if you have paid staff, of course, with your fellow staff and your supervisor, set a legacy giving goal, and along with your annual campaign goal, and make sure that there's agreement on that. And we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but I'm talking about small goals, but very concrete. Maybe your legacy giving goal is 2 commitments to legacy gifts this year. Maybe it's bigger, but just small. Start small. And then again, very little cost. Make sure your email signature blocks include a phrase, have you remembered us in your will or trust? And it can be as simple as that. And on all your printed material, make sure that that same question is asked. Again, this is just making sure it's in front of people all the time so that when they are ready to hear it and are working on their will, getting ready to, they are reminded. Of course, I'll just continue on here for a moment. On your website, you can add, make sure that phrase, that question is there. And then as you get commitments from donors who have left you, who have named you in their will, who have made this legacy commitment, get their story. You know, what inspired them? Get their picture if they're okay with that, and share that on your website to inspire others. So it's taking that beyond just a question, but then sharing with all your audiences how these donors have decided to make this legacy gift and how they feel about it. Usually they're so positive and really excited about it. You can then start making presentations to groups. I would start with your board first, and ensure that they have the information, because pretty soon you want them to be the ones who are also doing outreach. And you can certainly use social media, but just be careful with that, and thoughtful about how you do that. When you use the term legacy giving, some people will go right to, oh, they're talking about when I die. And you can get around that a little bit, but you just want to be cognizant of what words you're using on social media. But if you have an uplifting story from a current legacy donor, that would be a great thing to post on social media. Questions or experience with any of these low cost, no cost options that have been done, or are there questions in the chat box, Celeste?
Yeah, there's one question. I think this pertains to a few slides ago, Elizabeth, but Valerie asked, does the nonprofit have to obtain a copy of the death certificate to obtain donations as nonprofit IRA beneficiaries?
I believe and Harry, you're on here too. Do you know the answer to that off the top of your head? Because I would say yes, eventually you do need the death certificate, but Harry, is that, yeah.
Yeah, I've done it both ways. Sometimes we don't even know about the donor dying until the IRA sends us a note and with a
Yeah,
check in it. But on the
exactly.
other hand, if you know it's coming, you can kind of get ahead of it, order a copy of the death certificate, and then present it to the custodian, and that can sometimes expedite things. In fact, I walked into a bank before, just like wanted to drop off a certificate with the manager saying, you know, we're a beneficiary of this person's bank account. And I left with a check for $435,000 that day, like 2 hours later. So like, I mean, sometimes they just say, oh, well, now that we have it, we'll just do it. But otherwise it would have been months before they found out, looked at it, sent it to us. So
Yeah, very good. And Harry's example is I would say the anomaly. I know here IRAs take months to sometimes longer than that to
I'd
settle.
echo
So
that sentiment. My impression is that there's very little regulation related to this industry and this facet of the industry. And so what will happen is money will get held by the custodians. They'll continue to invest it, and you know, and they're not. There's no incentive for them to proactively distribute that money, and you know, and then they often will require the nonprofit to create a new account with their firm so that you can transfer the money into your new account just to liquidate it back to your nonprofit. Which, it's a total scam, but I mean, whatever. It's a beautiful gift that just
Yeah.
requires a lot of rigmarole.
Yeah. And at the National Association of Charitable Gift Planners, there is a committee of that group that is working on this issue. And they have a spreadsheet, a very thorough spreadsheet of many of the fund administrators and what's required and what's not and where to push back. So if you are in one of those situations, you can contact me and I can direct you to that group and that information. I see things getting better slowly, but hopefully in a few years we'll have things maybe a little bit better. Other questions?
Nothing in the chat.
Okay, so we are going to move on. So here are so we just went over low, no cost. If you are at an organization that you don't have a lot, but you can do a little bit more, but you don't have a specific legacy giving person, plan giving expert, there are a lot of outside resources that can help you. They can help you really provide you with some web pages on legacy giving, some collateral that's really good to go. You just fill in customize it for your organization. And these are all links that you'll be able to access when you get the slides. And the benefit of using these outside resources is that it's really specialized, and this is a specialized field, and not all of us are experts in it. And so it's a great way to elevate your organization in this area without having to do a lot of investment in it. So you can think about that and see if that's right for you. I also wanted to spend some time today talking about legacy societies. And these, a legacy society is kind of a recognition group, a recognition vehicle for your legacy donors. And the first thing I want to say is maybe not call it a society. We at the Community Foundation have had a legacy society for 10 years, I think. And we've been inviting people to a legacy society reception. And we have feedback that sounds a little too hoity-toity for them. And they're just down home Alaskans. They're not society type people. And so we've had to really make our invitations very casual. We're still calling it Legacy Society, but really saying come to a very casual event. So maybe think about not even using the word society in what you create. So the Legacy Society is to recognize those folks who have made a legacy gift to your organization, which could include all of the things listed here, and others if you want. And, this is something that you create for your organization. And so then you would say, well, how do I know who's made a planned gift or who's committed a legacy gift to my organization? Well, this is where you're asking, right? Have you made a gift, a legacy gift to us? Let us know. And then that's something else. You can start conversations with that. And you might be surprised with how many people say, oh yeah, I listed you as one of the charities to get money from my estate. And then you start keeping track of those people. And it really can grow rather quickly. Think about what the name of your legacy society will be. Some people name it after a person, maybe the founder of their organization. Some might name it after their organization Right now, it's just the Alaska Community Foundation Legacy Society here. I know Celeste has ideas for something else. The date, the year of your organization's inception might be an idea, a landmark that's associated with your idea, some inspiring phrase. But be really intentional about naming your legacy society, and make sure that it's really easily recognizable, and connected to your organization and your mission. Any examples of legacy societies that are in existence now that you want to share, either in the chat box or by raising your digital hand? Okay, so things to think about as you set up your policies for your legacy society. If someone tells you verbally that you're in their will, is that good enough? If someone leaves you $100 in their will, does that qualify for your legacy society? And does a gift commitment have to be irrevocable to be in your legacy society, meaning it cannot be changed? And I would argue ardently against that. I would say 99.9% of the commitments we have here at ACF can be changed. They are revocable. And that, I believe, is the case with most of our legacy gifts to nonprofits. Will your society have founders? And when someone dies, will you continue to list them? So all of these are really good questions to think about as you are putting together the plans for your legacy society, because these are things that are going to pop up. And I highly recommend that you create some sort of a commitment form. It's non-binding, and that you, the answer to the first question is verbally is not enough, but they could send you the information on this commitment form or in an email. That's what I would do, but your organization is different and you might do something different. What we're finding and what others have found is that members of legacy societies are really not interested in coffee cups or other things. But a lapel pin is well received, something that they can wear with pride. They oftentimes do want to be recognized, but that commitment form that you provide to them to fill out can ask them if you can list them as part of your legacy society or not. And if you can, then you can list them, list that list in your annual report, in your newsletter. Maybe at your events, you have a little name tag ribbon that you use that say Legacy Society member. And then for other recognition, consider inviting them as VIPs to certain events, or have a special event just for them, where you are able to connect with them, update them on what your organization is doing, and just keeping your organization top of mind with them. You really do want to keep good records. Ideally, you're able to track this in your donor database, but if not, do it somehow. And keep, of course, as we've talked about, connected with your folks and make sure you're recognizing them properly. And as we've talked about, most of these gifts can be changed, and you want to make sure your organization is top of mind with them. And as we talked about, most realized charitable plans are added within 5 years of death, so make sure you're still in there as the years go by. So if you are going to be doing these no or low cost options, here's a little checklist for you to take care of. You want to make sure those policies are in place. and Cynthia had a lot of great information for you. And these policies would be for your gift acceptance and for your legacy society. You want to, of course, educate your board and your fellow staff about what you're doing with legacy giving. Create your legacy society and make sure they're included. It's included in your policies. Make sure you've got a commitment form. Make your own legacy commitment first. And something we're starting to promote here is 5% giving, so that it's really accessible. And we've already had several people commit that, yeah, I can do 5% of my IRA to ACF and leave 95% to my family. That they've said something like, if my family can't live without 5%, without 5%, it's not really going to make a difference, right? Or something like that. Make your own commitment first, as we've talked about, and then start setting up one-on-one meetings with your board and past board members. And I think you'll be really maybe surprised and impressed about how generous those folks are and how committed they are to your organization. And then go back to that list of low-cost ideas in the spreadsheet, about your email signature, etc. Okay, do you have time and resources for more? And actually, before we move on, let me just take a quick break and ask if there are any questions.
I don't see any questions in the chat, but I did see some responses to Legacy Society naming, which UA Foundations is the Legacy Society. And then there was a previous organization that Kayla Fox Rivers worked with where they called it the year that they were founded, so the 1982 Society.
Very good. And as the years go on, that 1982 becomes, more of a touchstone, I can imagine. So that, wow, you've been around since 1982. That's 40 some years now, right? So good.
And then there's something in here now from Stacy. Have you heard of a planning idea where you ask the donor to think of a third child split if they have two kids? So maybe thinking of the charity as the third child, it sounds like.
Yep. Yeah, I have heard people who talk about that, and that, of course, is, donor specific. But it's a great way that you could introduce the concept. And that, of course, would be something beyond, you would think, beyond the 5%. And so it really is important that you know your donors. And it might be something that you could promote different options. So Stacy, you could, say if you're starting to promote planned giving, you could say, there's lots of options for planned giving. You might consider giving 5% of your IRA. You might consider giving 5% of your estate. Maybe you want to consider your charity being an additional child, and say it like that. I think that could work. So if you have time and resources for more, I wanted to talk through 6 steps for actually setting up a legacy program. And some of these things we've talked about, and we're actually going to go over these things not in much depth, but set a goal for your program, and make it simple. It can be as simple as I said, secure 3 documented legacy gift commitments in 2026. I would add to this some objectives or strategies, maybe, depending on what word you want to use. But to get those 3, you might have to talk to 10 people. So maybe one of your strategies is to talk to 10 board members / current or past board members or flags in the year. And then the goal is to secure 3 documented legacy commitments. And of course, make sure that your goals are simple, measurable, and agreed upon by everybody in your organization that needs to be there. And then consider establishing a legacy giving committee of your board. Um, Maybe it's 3 to 5 members. Um, and they don't have to be current board members. Maybe it's a way to include a past board member or another very committed individual. Ideally, all of these people have or in the process of making a legacy commitment to your organization. And these are the people that will spearhead your legacy giving effort. If you have paid staff, these people would be working with you. But if you are all volunteer, this would be your legacy giving effort. And then start really identifying your audiences. And just like we talked about on that donor segmentation slide, look at your past and current board members, look at those flags. And here is the additional thing I really encourage you to do, and that is to start building relationships with local professional advisors. Again, estate planning attorneys, CPAs, financial planners. And there are estate planning councils in Anchorage, Fairbanks, and maybe Juneau. I tried to track some information down from Juneau's a year or so ago and found it difficult, but maybe they're more active now. But you, as a nonprofit professional, can join the Estate Planning Council as a member in the philanthropic community. And certainly, Harry and I would welcome you to join us at the Anchorage Council, where we're members. And if you have an estate planning attorney who's a friend or of your organization, or personally talk with them, what you're trying to help the local professional advisors understand is that your organization is alive and well, and you are able to accept bequests and other charitable gifts, other planned gifts. And sometimes that's all it takes is for the professional advisors to know that information. And they're not necessarily going to be able to promote your organization as a beneficiary to their clients, but if their clients brings up the name of your organization, um, they'll say, "Oh yeah, great." And sometimes they can, um, when they're talking to their clients about what they want to do with their will, estate planning attorneys are encouraged by people like Harry and me to bring up the topic of charitable giving. And if that person in the if their client is interested in your mission, even though they don't mention your name, if the estate planning attorney is familiar with your organization, they can do the matching there. Oh, isn't XYZ organization doing that? And so it can really be helpful to you. It can also be helpful to have a friend as an estate planning attorney, so that if you take another step that we'll get to in a moment, they can help you with that. So, and we're almost there to that next topic. But step 4 is really determining what your communications and engagement activities are going to be. We talked about one-on-one conversations, put a plan together for that. Maybe you want to put together some sort of a legacy giving brochure that mentions maybe the 5% option, maybe the additional child concept. And then, of course, where will you be mentioning legacy giving? We hope it will be on your website, in your newsletter, some social media. You can use your stories from your legacy givers to post there when you get those. And then if you have the resources, you can do mailings it's really just a letter that is saying, we know you're a longtime supporter, and many longtime supporters have included us in their will. Have you? If you have, complete the form. Put your Legacy Society form in there so that we can recognize you now. or just let us know. Or if you want to remain anonymous, the form should allow for that. That can really garner you a handful of folks very quickly. And maybe those could be some of your first stories. And then you might want to consider some events. I know our affiliate community foundations are doing legacy cultivation events. We are doing legacy cultivation events. And really, they're just fundraisers. You bring people together and talk about your mission and what you're doing. Everybody in the room is somebody that you know, that knows your organization. And this is where you again mention, we're here to remind you that when the next time you're revising your will, or even just if you want to add a codicil to your will, you can leave a gift to our organization in your will or estate plans. And then the other thing that charities and are really finding helpful is to host a wills and estate planning seminar. And that's with the help of an estate planning attorney, or you can partner with ACF if your endowment is here. And we have one coming up in person here in Anchorage in October that you can invite your folks to. And we'll have one in the spring via, it'll be online that you can invite your folks to. And basically, it's a very basic presentation about what wills planning and estate planning is about. And there's, of course, a section in that about charitable giving is possible through your estate planning. And it's an option, it's an opportunity for the estate planning attorney to get in front of people. And yes, they are looking for new clients, but it's very low key. And it's a great opportunity for your constituents to get some wonderful information about wills and estate planning. And it's your opportunity to welcome people to that event and talk about how briefly what your organization is doing and that you can be named in their will. And then, of course, once you get some legacy givers, you want to recognize them. And for some organizations, it's appropriate to have recognition receptions. Of course, you want to make those down home for your down home donors. Part of your plan for your legacy society needs to include monitoring and tracking your progress. We've already talked about how important it is to have accurate records of your legacy society donors. And ideally, you can do it in your donor software. But if not, keep a separate spreadsheet. And of course, keep those donor commitment forms because that's your backup there. And those donor commitment forms are going to change. I can almost guarantee it. You know, the next time somebody you say, "Oh, I just updated my will. You're still in it, but I'm giving you more." And so you give them the form and they update it. Maybe sometimes they might say, "Oh, no, you're not in it anymore." Well, that's your chance to work with that donor over time, but maybe the next time they renew that you will be in it. And then, of course, you need to steward these legacy donors. As we talked about, these are changeable commitments. And so you need to treat these donors well. Of course, thanking them initially for the gift that they have committed to, recognizing them in the ways that we've talked about, and highlighting them where permission is provided in your collateral and on your social media. So that's a really simple outline of something that you could put together at your organization. Some of our affiliates who have very, very limited staff, like just 30 hours a month, I think, have been able to do this with volunteers. And so I know it is possible. If you are in a position where you think you might be ready to actually embark on an endowment campaign, that is another beast, a big thing. I would encourage you to seek some advice from folks who've done that before. Um, are there people here who we have a little bit more time? Are there people here who are interested in some of that? And I could outline how ACF did that a few years ago.
We've got a yes in the chat from Valerie.
Okay. So I'll just briefly, we have about 10 minutes left. And so Valerie, first there really is, for some organizations, they do a feasibility study. And I suspect with AI, you can get a lot of the guidance now online about what is recommended. I know when I did a feasibility study when I was at United Way, what it was, it was an intense a few days. We brought out a consultant from outside. What we were doing, we were bringing together our very best supporters to help us in the feasibility study. And the purpose was not only to get their input, but to get their buy-in. And so by the end of the time together, we had the buy-in of some very key individuals, and they became our first legacy givers. And so that feasibility study, sometimes people think, oh, I know we can do it. It's much more than just, is it possible? It's really that buy-in process. So I wouldn't forego the feasibility step. And then, much like what we've talked about today, you really are going to need to, of course, have your policies in place. The success of your endowment campaign is going to depend on the breadth of your donor base, not only in numbers of people, but how long they've been around. How many flags do you have? Those long time donors. And then based on that, you can set goals. At ACF, we put together, and I was not here for this, but we put together a 5-year plan for an endowment campaign. And I would absolutely encourage something like that because it does take time. And unless you are a very unique organization, you can't drop everything else that you're doing and do just the endowment campaign. And setting the goals for your campaign in conjunction with the volunteer leadership of your campaign is important. And then using that volunteer leadership of your campaign, maybe your endowment committee, to really look at your list of flags, your donor segmented list, and start signing up for outreach and making one-on-one calls. And over time, things will, you'll have more collateral to share and more stories to share about people who have already made a commitment. And then you're talking with people about what they value about your organization and what they want to see as a legacy of their own at your organization. So very basic. When I look back at the records, it really was a 5-year process here. Very first few years are, first year putting together the committee, getting those people to make the commitments, getting the word out a little more broadly, but not much, really keeping it as a silent campaign, meaning you're not doing public promotion, just promotion internally to your very best supporters until the second to the last year when you could make it public. In fact, ACF may have waited until the very last year to go public. And so by then they had a significant portion of their commitments made. And of course, the commitments that are being made can be changed. And the goal was the dollar value of the, the current value of the commitment made. It's really probably has almost no connection to what the actual value would be upon their death. But that's how we did it. And it's really kind of only the way that you can do it. These commitments are not pledges that are put in our system. They are just a bequest promise that can be changed. Those of you that have done endowment campaigns, would you add anything else? We have a few more minutes.
Yeah, this is Liz at Chilkat Valley Community Foundation, and we've found that we've had 2 legacy house parties so far that included board members, current known legacy donors, and targeted potentials. And they have been very well received. We had our first one 2 years ago. We gained 8 Legacy Society members from that. We just had our second one, and we've already had a couple people say they took information, they're revising their wills and going to do that. So it's a really inspirational event to have, because everyone is happy to be there. They see people that are like-minded, and we had at the legacy parties, we've picked 3 Legacy Society members to speak about why they have made an estate plan that included our organization. And we picked people that covered different areas, like single people, people that were younger, and older people whose kids are all grown. And it really resonates with people when they hear those stories. So it's been a great thing. The other thing that we gave, when someone signs our form, we've made a really nice Legacy Society bookmark that's kind of a keepsake, and it's sturdy, and people use it for years, and they're reminded of their status as a legacy donor.
Liz, thank you so much for sharing that. And yeah, Chilkat Valley Community Foundation has done great things. And her example of that cultivation event, and that, of course, doesn't have to be part of an endowment campaign. That's just growing your campaign one event at a time. Great idea. Thank you, Liz. Other comments or shares? Questions?
Questions in the chat that seem to be getting answered, Elizabeth, but just our community foundations under ACF. So I'm assuming those legacy or the affiliate community foundations included in the ACF Legacy Society. And Gail from Cordova answered that affiliate foundations form their own legacy societies.
Yes. Yes. Well, I have just a few more slides, but they're just lists of resources that you'll have access to when you get this. Here's some helpful reading materials. And you've heard me talk about Russell James. This is a book of his, but he has some excellent YouTube videos. If you want to learn more about plan giving, you can go watch YouTube videos by Russell James and just go as deep as you can. He can get very complicated very quickly because he knows it all. And then Brian Klontz, I think Harry mentioned him last time, but if you are not part of ACF and you have charitable gifts of non-cash assets that you want to accept but really don't have the wherewithal to do within your organization, his organization is recommended. And one of my favorites is Donor-Centered Fundraising by Penelope Burke. If you haven't read that, super helpful for just learning to put things in terms of how you're speaking to the donor, how the donor needs to hear it. And then here are a few more links for information that might be helpful to you as you're looking at growing your legacy society. And a few more. And here's Charitable Solutions, which is Brian Clonce's organization. There you've got Russell James. And that I had mentioned the National Association of Charitable Gift Planners. They're the ones with that extensive list of IRA administrators that they're working on making sure that we can gain access to the funds that are bequested to us. Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time today. I hope that you learned something and can go and start promoting your promoting legacy giving to your donors. For those of you that are have your funds at ACF, as I said, we've got a couple wills and estate planning seminars coming up that you can invite your constituents to if you wish. And Celeste can provide you some information about that if you're interested. And Celeste, would you add anything else?
No, just Elizabeth, thank you so much for your very informative presentation. You really helped wrap this entire summer series up, so we really appreciate your expertise and time here today. Thank you everyone for sticking with us for 3 weeks. We really appreciate you, and thank you to the Alaska Community Foundation for sponsoring this session, this summer series for folks here with the AFP Alaska chapter. One last thing before we end, I am going to put a link in the chat. So AFP Alaska chapter, we host educational events throughout the year, and the next one we have scheduled is in September. And you will see some familiar faces at this in-person in Anchorage session. So I put the link to register there. Elizabeth Miller will be speaking at the AFPPM event, where the article that we'll be talking about is the 2024 Leadership Impact Study. And Cynthia Libby, who we met at the first session, will be helping to guide us in that discussion. So more to come on that. You can register and get more information. Otherwise, I think I'm going to stop the recording.